Hello, my name is Zachary Brooks, and my students or people I just talked to about academic things call me Dr. Z. So I'm going to get geeky today with the subject I chose in my dissertation. That's like doing homework for 2 years or something like that. It's kind of a dumb choice, but people make these dumb choices and then they find ways to rationalize those choices over the course of their lifetime. But in all seriousness, my dissertation was a topic called bilingual decision making. Bilingual decision what, you ask? That's right, bilingual decision making. So I'm going to geek out and invite you to come with me and share your own thoughts about a topic I find fascinating. But even better, it's a topic that everyone can and should and probably does have an opinion on. And that's really why I like this topic, is that some people study some very technical, esoteric things, and these are fascinating things, and they change the world. But they're hard to talk about with sort of just random people. And this topic, everyone has some instincts or intuition about it, and I often learn something when I share it. So that's the impetus behind my program. So hello again, we're back. So what is bilingual decision making? Well, in the first episode, we defined it as the study of how decisions can change as a function of language competence. Now, can change is very important because maybe they change and maybe they don't. That's why it's a study. Let's find out if they can change or do change as a function of language competence. So in other words, if you're an American living abroad and you're speaking the local language, would you make a different decision than the locals who speak their first language? In the first episode, we also kind of gave an overview of decision-making research. That can be normative, descriptive, or prescriptive. In other words, we can study decision-making as if it's perfect, accept it as imperfect, or try to improve on our mistakes. We also, in the first episode, looked at applied linguistics. While you're suffering with sounds, grammar, and pragmatics, what's that? They, those weird applied linguists, are gleefully studying you and all of the suffering you're going through while you're making mistakes in a language. That doesn't sound very nice, but it is for science. Finally, we looked at how words such as rare can be used differently by first and second language speakers. So we kind of talked about how second language speakers gave higher numbers, more than first language speakers did, for words such as rare, very unlikely, and unlikely. And so why would that be? Why would a second language speaker give a higher number with the word rare than a first language speaker? So probably one of the reasons has to do with how people perceive risk in an environment where they have to use their new language. They want to give themselves more chances to be correct, so using 7% instead of 4%, let's say, provides more room for error. Another way of thinking about this is that second language speakers want to give themselves fewer chances to be incorrect, which makes a lot of sense. If you're in a different country using a different language, and you don't want to be incorrect all the time, because as it is, you can make lots of mistakes, even when you're trying your absolute best. So why not try to reduce those mistakes by assessing risk using these words a little bit differently? So now that we've talked about decision making and how it's studied, remember there's different ways: normative, prescriptive, descriptive. How do we get the bilingual part from bilingual decision making? So from an academic perspective, the bilingual part comes from the fields of applied linguistics and second language acquisition. So the group of geeks who like applied linguistics, they study things such as processes of acquisition, so how you acquire language, usually a second language, how do you comprehend a second language, and how do you produce a new language? How do you make the sounds that are unfamiliar to you? In other words, while you're struggling to learn a new language, these people are studying you. That's kind of creepy. Anyway, from cultural to cognitive processes, they study challenges of learning a new language from the perspective of identity. If you don't like the language you're learning, you won't be able to learn it very well. On the other hand, even when you like the language you're studying, it can still be hard to learn a new language because of sounds and the grammar. So a couple approaches to studying learning languages include things such as, and these are just a very, very few, I'm just trying to give some overview. One would be something called eye tracking studies. So eye tracking studies are just like they sound. They track people's eyes as they read. The patterns that people's eyes follows is similar to for first and second language speakers. But second language speakers tend to go a little bit slower, which would make sense. Another way to study how people learn second languages is something called lexical studies. And lexical studies examine how first and second language speakers recognize real words and non-words. So, second language speakers are a bit slower when it comes to recognizing words. That's probably not a big surprise either. And there's another concept that is important to understand, and it's called interlanguage. I really like this concept. So interlanguage refers to the language that is used by second language speakers that resembles both the language they're trying to learn, let's say English is a second language in the United States, with new vocabulary, new grammar, new sounds, and this also resembles the first language of the speaker who is learning new language, let's say Spanish. So a Spanish speaker comes to the United States, they bring with him or her syntax, words, and sounds. Now they're trying to combine or add another language. And so before they've separated these languages into two, they kind of combine things. And they're just using the world they know to try to make sense of it and then try to communicate to the best of their ability. So if you've ever been on vacation and you mix words from multiple languages, you certainly understand the concept of interlanguage intuitively. So it might make you feel dumb, but it's very, very normal, right, if you mix these words. So does that make you feel any better? I don't know. It doesn't make me feel any better at the moment I do that, but when I study it, some way it gives me some sort of peace of mind to know that, you know what, it's okay to be dumb and come across as dumb because you are learning after all. So now that we've talked about decision making, good decisions, bad decisions, and how to improve our decisions, and now that we've talked about the study of people making mistakes, learning new languages, we can now move on to the big question that usually comes to people's mind at this point. You probably know what the question is. People always ask, okay, what kinds of decisions? And this is an incredibly important question. So when people ask me this, I might anticipate it, but I always seem to be surprised by it because it's such a question that gets at the heart of the problem of studying people who speak multiple languages and if their decisions differ. It's a great question. So every episode of this podcast is designed to be about 9 minutes long, and it will explore how decisions can change as a function of language competence. So I'll start with some investigations I've did, and then I'll branch off to other areas with other researchers. There are very smart people working in many fields who explore the question of decision-making in bilingual contexts or cultural contexts all over the world. And if they aren't, they should, because bilingual decision-making is kind of fun. So let's start with a word. So the word is probable. What do you think when you hear the word probable or probably? Which sentences come to mind when you hear the word probable or probably? How about, it will probably rain tomorrow? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means there's a better than 50% chance that something will happen, in this case, rain. But what if I ask you to give me a number from 1 to 100 for probable? Those 1 to 100 kind of indicates a percentage. So think of a number. So I want you to think of a number between 1 and 100 when you hear the word probable. You got a good number? Good. So maybe you would say 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever it is, right? You would give me a number between 1 and 100. Or maybe you have your own number. Would that number change if someone were speaking a second language? So according to my research, this is the first thing I did, the answer is no. There are no statistical differences in the numbers that first and second language speakers give. But if you just ask people in isolation to give a number for the word probable, there's no differences. But what if you had a word like rare in a sentence? In a sentence such as, it is rare for Sandra to go jogging. How many times per month does Sandra go jogging? Your job is to give a number between 1 and 30 to indicate the days in the month. Will there be a difference between the two numbers? Between people who speak English as a first language and English as a second language? So here's the sentence again. If it's rare for Sandra to go jogging, how many times per month does Sandra go jogging? In my research, second language speakers gave higher numbers in this sentence and in 9 other sentences. So why would that be? So I'll give you an example before I move on. So if we have rare in a sentence, if it is rare for Sandra to go jogging, how many times per month does Sandra go jogging? So a first language speaker might say 1, 2, or 3. Let's say the number 2. So 2 days per month, they would say Sandra goes jogging. A second language speaker is more likely to give a number such as 5 or 6. That is a significant difference. Now why would that be? Why would a second language speaker give a higher number indicating a different sense of probability? So one of the reasons probably has to do with how people perceive risk in an environment where they have to use a new language. They want to probably give themselves more chances to be correct, so using 7% instead of 3% provides more room for error. Another way to think about second language speakers is that they want to give themselves fewer chances to be incorrect. It's just the other side of the coin. So the next time you're using your second language and you use a word like rare or probable or whatever that word is in that particular language, think about how you are assessing the risk in the world using your new language. Thanks for tuning in for the first podcast on bilingual decision making. This has been Dr. Z, Zachary Brooks. I hope you appreciate how speaking another language can help you see the world in a whole new way and sometimes make decisions that vary. But does that mean the decisions are worse? Anyway, subscribe to find out how next time we will look at ethical decision making. This gets people talking all the time, and how people's decisions may vary because of their first and second language in ethical decision making type of tests. In the meantime, happy deciding.